On this episode of What's Going On with Shipping, Savannah is a booming. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, been on a little hiatus here. Got a little distracted and busy. Unfortunately, I have a full-time job as chair of the Department of History, Criminal Justice, and Political Science at beautiful Campbell University. And beginning of the semester, issues come up, and it keeps me away from the show. But back now. We also had some fires on my volunteer fire department. Kept me really busy. But now we're back, and today we're going to talk about what is happening in the Port of Savannah. Savannah just announced a record year, 2022, 5.9 million 20-foot equivalent units, the most they have ever moved in this. Let's talk a little bit about the Port of Savannah and where that port is going in the future. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this story. So this is a story posted by Mike Schuller over on G-Captain announcing the record profits of, or record capacity of Savannah. I just want to show you this chart real quick here because I think this chart is really significant. This comes from John McCowan over at Blue Alpha. And one of the things that had been happening pre-COVID was the shift of cargo from the West Coast to the East and Gulf Coast. It had been declining since way back when. This goes back to 2017. Now, there's a bit of an uptick here due to COVID, where we see it kind of boom back. But now it's following that trend, and it's actually falling at an even greater rate now, below 44% of the cargo going to the West Coast. But let's talk about what is specifically happening in the Port of Savannah. This video comes from Georgia Ports, and so I'll give you a little bit of backdrop. So the Port of Savannah built its fastest growing container terminal in the U.S., handled a record 5.9 million TEUs in 2022. That's an increase of over 5% from last year. According to the executive director, Griff Lynch, it was a challenging year, but collaborative effort across Georgia's supply chain ensured cargo movement remained fluid. So obviously the port benefited last year from the shift of cargo from the West Coast to the East Coast. This has been a plan all along, ever since the Panama Canal underwent its expansion with the third lane in 2016. And as I showed you in that chart before, we're seeing that take place. The Port of Savannah achieved 4 of its top 5 months for container volume in calendar year 2022, with the peak month being August with 575,500 TEUs, 20-foot equivalent units, moved. In comparison, the Port of Savannah's 2021 volumes were up 20% compared to 2020, when the port handled 4.6 million TEUs and up 1.8% over 2019. The port is undergoing a huge expansion with the renovation of Berth 1 at Garden City Terminal. They can now handle ships over 16,000 TEU. The Port of Savannah is set to increase its annual capacity from 6 million to 7.5 million TEUs in 2023 and 9 million by 2025. According to the board chairman for Georgia Ports, Joe Woolton, we're excited about the possibilities ahead with major infrastructure projects delivering greater capacity and efficiency for our customers. At Georgia Ports, we're bringing to market faster vessel service, quicker turnaround times for trucks, and more room to grow business. Additionally, one of the things we're seeing is not just the growth of the Port of Georgia, but Georgia Ports in general. We're, for example, seeing a 16% increase in breakbulk tonnage, up from last year. Colonel's Island Terminal in Brunswick handles 651,101 units of auto and heavy machinery, along with Ocean Terminal in Savannah moving another 19,630 Ro-Ro units. That's all shifting. They're going to get rid of the Ro-Ro coming in, breakbulk coming into Savannah, and go all to containers in Savannah. This expansion was part of a long, thought-out process that began way back in the early 2010s. This is when the plans were afoot to expand the Panama Canal. Georgia realized, and Savannah realized in particular, that it could take advantage of that new lane of the Panama Canal with these new Neo-Panamax vessels. These are ships that are well beyond the capacity of the existing locks that have been built way back in 1914. Prior to 2016, the biggest ships that can come through the Panama Canal were ships that can handle about 4 to 5,000 TEUs, but now they can handle up to 15, 16,000 TEUs. And the amazing thing about Savannah is you can be sitting there on the waterfront of Savannah and seeing these massive ships passing by, heading up to the new terminals in Savannah. The other big issue is the amount of land available for expansion of the ports in Savannah. So this is a quick snapshot of the Port of Savannah. You can see that there are vessels actually sitting here off berth right now, waiting to get in. Still a little bit of a backlog to get into Savannah. But as said before, as you come into Savannah, you sail right past the beautiful downtown region, and the container terminal is all the way up here, further upriver. I sailed into Savannah back in the 90s, and there was always an issue with draft coming into Savannah, but that has been fixed. They have undertaken with the Army Corps of Engineers an extensive process. The Georgia ports, and again, Georgia ports are unique. This is a state-run, not a local entity, so they created the Georgia Port Authority back in 1945 to really get Georgia booming. One of the fastest growing areas we see in maritime trade right now is the state of Georgia. But one of the things they began way back in 2013 was what's called the Savannah Harbor Expansion Program. This was the program to dredge the harbor, to get it down to, from a depth of 42 feet down to 47 feet. That was a big project to undertake. Obviously, it was extremely expensive, almost $1 billion of dredging. They just completed it last year, the last of the official dredging to get them down the depth. There's still maintenance dredging to keep the port in the harbor and the channel at that draft, but they were able to get down to that 47-foot part. One of the most interesting stories behind the development of Savannah was a problem, and it had to do with the Civil War. A Civil War ironclad, the CSS Georgia, was smack dab in the middle of the channel there that had to be excavated out. The site of the Georgia was well known. There was a site survey done by somebody I know, Gordon Watts, way back in the 1990s. But as they began the dredging project, they had to remove a Civil War ironclad. So you had a little bit of archaeology here and a little bit of current maritime industry policy at play. Two things that I absolutely love to discuss at play here. So let's talk about Port of Georgia. Let's get into some numbers here. So this is the site for Georgia Ports. I'll, of course, have it in the show notes so you can link over to it. All this information comes from Georgia Ports. Let's talk a little bit about some of the materials. So numbers here. These are the numbers that you see here by across the number of containers. And this is the record year we're at. So 2022, you're looking at almost 9 million TEUs. Again, go back just 10 years to 2012, 2.96 million TEUs. Go back to 2003, 1.5 million. You can see the expansion of the port here and how it's really just leaped by bounds. Let's talk a little bit about the cargo coming in. So talk a little bit about cargo. This is total container trade for calendar years 2017 through 2021. You see the amount increasing here. The 5-year growth in terms of exports are up 36%. Imports are up 42%. And when you break it down here in chart, you can see how that kind of evolves. Jump on over to here. We'll look at total annual vessel calls for calendar year from 2017 through 2021. Interesting numbers here, because one of the things you see here is that the actual number of vessels coming in is down. Total port calls are down. You're at a minus 14% volume decrease into the Port of Savannah. And that has to do with the fact that the size of the ships have increased tremendously. You're no longer getting the smaller vessels that are coming into the Port of Savannah. Now you're getting those large Neo-Panamax vessels coming in. Absolutely changes the structure of the Port of Savannah here. Let's look at imports into Savannah by calendar year. So for the past 5 years, what are the leading imports in there? Well, you're looking at retail consumer goods, machinery, appliances, and electronics, furniture, hardware and houseware, automotive, food, mineral, apparel, rug sheets, towels and blankets, toys, and others. And you see that breakup. Not really one overwhelming commodity that takes up the number of imports into the Port of Savannah, but some nice kind of balanced slices coming in. But not a lot of basically raw material. These are all finished goods. When you look at the exports coming out of Savannah, you see them right here. Food is one of the biggest exports coming out. Wood pulp, paper and paper boards, automotive, clay, logs and lumber, fabrics, chemical, resins and rubber, machinery, appliances, and electronics. And again, not one specific topic or one specific item really occupies that chart. Come over here to look at imports in. What are the imports we're looking at here by calendar year from region? Well, where are the imports coming in largely? Well, it's Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, Southern Asia. Obviously, that is the big one. And when you look at the percentages, you can see the amount of Northeast Asia. That is China coming in. And then when you add in Southeast Asia, add in South Asia and India, you're looking at almost 75% of the goods coming into Savannah for imports are coming from Asia. Let's go ahead, head over here to exports out of Savannah by calendar year, and they're heading out to Northeast Asia, to Northern Europe, Southeast Asia, Mediterranean, and the subcontinent. So a little bit more balanced right there, not quite the huge percentage you see, but again, over 44% are heading to Northeast, Southeast Asia, and then about another 25% heading over to Europe and the Mediterranean. And lastly, I want to leave you with this. This is a great little, if you want a little bit more on the Port of Savannah, I always try to give you some resources to tap into. John Paul Rodrigue does this online book that you should look at, Port Economics, Management and Policy. You can buy it from Routledge Press, but he has it online, which is great because he updates it. And one of the case studies he looks at is this, the emergence of the Savannah Gateway. And I think it's a great read if you want to delve more into the topic about why Savannah has developed where it is. If you look at the 4 big ports for containers in the United States, LA Long Beach, New York, New Jersey, Houston, and Savannah. Savannah is one of the 4 corners there, taking the southeastern part of the United States. And because of the massive amount of population moving into the area, because of the availability of land outside of Savannah in rural Georgia for pop-up yards, for containers, because of the availability of highways, interstates, airports, rail lines, and because of the close proximity of the population, Savannah emerges as a key gateway. In other words, this is where you bring your cargo into and can distribute it. I think we're going to see the Port of Savannah booming here in the future, with predictions of Savannah to be the size of LA Long Beach and New York within 10 years. And it's going to be a lot of competition. However, I will tell you that what Savannah has done, other ports can do too. Nipping at Savannah's heels are going to be other ports. Jacksonville, Charleston, Norfolk, Mobile, New Orleans. There's going to be a lot of other ports that want to get this. And so they're going to see what Savannah has done and maybe try to replicate that and do it. Some ports missed the boat. I'm in North Carolina. Wilmington, for example, did not invest in the dredging, did not take advantage of the opportunity here, and has kind of missed that opportunity, whereas other ports have invested greatly in this. All of this feeds into the network that is the interior system. You need the drayage, you need the trucks, you need the road, you need the rail, you need the aviation, and you need the warehouses, you need the distribution center. You can't just look at bringing ships in. Ships don't solve the problem for you. You need the whole system. And the state of Georgia has been extremely smart and forward thinking in its investment in infrastructure and where they're going. And I think they should be a model for a lot of the states, municipalities, local areas to look at in what they're doing. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit that super thanks button below, give directly to the page, or head on over to Patreon. You'll see a link at the end of the show here or down in the show notes. You can become a monthly or yearly subscriber, a patron of the page. Until the next episode, this is Sal, signing off.